Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna try to explain something about materials, or actually master materials, instances, and something I call master instances. I don't know if there's a specific word for that, but I call them master instances, so let's keep it at that for now. And to show them, I'm gonna just set up a material real quick. I'm gonna make a red material, a green material, and a blue material. There. Now, we only need one at one time in this example. So let's set that up. We could use lerps, switches, like a static switch parameter, static switches, etc. For these you need booleans. That might be a bit hard to explain. Let's do lerps just to call easy. Okay. Either red or green, and another lerp for this. Okay. I don't need to name them, but this one could basically be seen as red or green. Freaking bug, stop annoying me. Red or green. And this one is command red green. Why is that bug there? Red green or blue. And let's put that into emissive color for this doesn't really matter. Okay, they need switches of course, or at least some input. Let's make them scalars, and this is gonna be called RB or red, green, or blue. I'll put it in here. And it's at the moment it's 0, so it should be giving A. And that one actually needs another switch as well. And call it red or green. And let's do it like this. 0 is red and 1 is green. And in this case 0 is red or green and 1 is blue. There. Now imagine this to be very complex math. Come on, weird. For some reason the comments things is a little bit bugged in 4.11, so you'll hear me complain about it a lot. Complex math, like 1 times, well actually 2 times 2. There. And this should be seen for funsies as another complex math, like 2 times 3. That's very hard to comprehend, I know. 2 times 3, that's really hard, but bear in mind. And this is even more complex math, and because it's going to be 5 times 5. I mean, nobody can do that, but alright. So this is basically master material. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna open the content browser and make a material instance out of it. Create material instance. Material instance, MI, that's always the way I do it. Material instance. There we go. And I double click on it. You have all the options I've added. So this option, 0 is red and 1 is green, and 0 is red or green and 1 is blue. The option is here. So if I want this to be green, I need to put this to 1. If I want this to be blue, I can put this to 1. And let's see. If I want this to be green, there we go. So there are a few options. I can set it up differently, but let's just keep it at that for now. The thing is, if this was complex math, 2 by 2, this is 4, it would need, how do I explain this properly? The material instance uses the math created in the master material. So the 2 times 2 is being stored in this master material and passed on to the material instance. So that math is already done. Same for the 2 times 3 and the 5 times 5. That math is already done. If this is a very complex node with a lot of nodes, so let's just fake it a little bit. Imagine that this is all kinds of giant nodes with math and other calculations and maybe some world factors. I have no idea what I'm talking about because I'm not that good in math, but you get the point. So imagine it being all this kind of stuff, and that's all combined and everything is calculated. So when I select blue here, there, all that math that's inside this box was calculated and passed on in the material instance. But it also kept the math from the green and the red. So that's useless math in some cases. You don't want that, not always you want to share that in all the material instances. So you could make something else, a master instance. And let's make one now. I'm going to use a static switch for that. Oh, static switch parameter. There. And instead of the lerps in this case, I'm gonna use the static switches. So let me remove this one. And this one is gonna be called RG or blue. And when it's false, let's make it actually sound even better. If it's true, it's red or green, or false, blue. So you understand what's going on. So we can move that. If it's false, it's blue. Let's make a second static switch and call this one, if it's true, it's red. Or if it's false, it's green. There we go. If it's true, it's red. If it's false, it's green. And if this one is true, it's either red or green. And let's put that back into the emitter for whatever thing you want it to be. Again, imagine that the red color is in very complex, incomprehensible math. The same for the green and same for the blue. I'm going to save it and I'm going to take a look at this material instance. At the moment there's only one option, and the texture is blue, which means that every calculation done for the red or the green is actually not available in this material instance. It's not being calculated, it's not being passed on until I enable the static switch and set it to true. Now only the green math has been passed on. So the red math and the blue math is not existent in this material instance. If I now enable this one, we have the red. Now only the red math is available in this material instance, not the green or the blue. And now comes the most interesting part. This could be a master material instance. And that means that, let me try to explain that properly. For it to explain it properly, let me change a little bit in this master material. I'm going to add a multiply in each, to which I'm going to put the red one there, and a scalar value. In this case, red power, because the higher this value, we can actually show that in the preview. At the moment it's black, but the higher this value, the more bright the red will be. Alright, let me stop previewing and let's set it up for each of them. There. And this one is called green power. And guess what this one's going to be called? You're right. Purple power. No, just kidding. Blue power. There we go. I'm going to save it. We have one additional option in here now. It's called red power because this material is red. If I change this value, it only affects the red channel, of course. But if I don't want this to be the red channel, but the green one, that power I just changed is not being used in this material instance anymore, only when the red one is active. So let's set up a master instance. Okay, let's go to the content browser and create a new material instance. Master material instance. And then underscore master material instance. So you know what's going on. In this case, it should be red. There we go. Let's change this to red. Alright. So any value that gets changed in this master instance will be passed on to other instances. So to make it more clear, this is a master material instance. I'm going to create a material instance out of that. And this is going to be material instance red instance. It's going to be a bit confusing, but bear with me. It's the material instance, and let's change this value to 4, and let's open the red. Where's the material instance? Come here. So if I change this value of the master material instance, the material instance of this one also gets that value. I probably need to refresh it, which is something sometimes a bit hard to check. There you go, it's 8. It's 8 now. If I change this to 12, this one is 12 as well. So the math that's put into the master material instance gets accepted by that material instance. And this means that any math that has already been calculated in this master material instance gets passed on to its material instance, which is very interesting. And now to properly set it up so you might have a clear view of it, let me create a folder. This one is called master instances. And in this case, the master instance goes into there. Move here. I'm going to duplicate this one and call it blue. Oh, I need to go to red, of course. Blue, and change this to blue. Here we go. This one is blue. And now I need to duplicate it one more time, and call it green. Alright. These are the master material instances. And they will control a lot of instances. So let me make a new folder. I could do it inside of here. I could do it in the master instances folder. It's whatever you prefer. Let me do it inside the master instances. Master material instance. Maybe that's even a better way for it. Material instance. And I'm gonna, for the blue one, I'm gonna create a material instance. Material instance master blue 1. I'm gonna move it over here into the material instance folder, and basically see that this value is 1 at the moment. But if I change this inside of here, let's say I want the blue to be more bright, let's do 10. I'm gonna save it, and in the material instance folder it's already 10. This is gonna be quite handy. So I also need one for the green. I'm gonna create a master material instance of the green. So master material instance, and call it green 1. Gonna move it here. And I'm also gonna create a material instance of the red one. This is gonna get quite confusing, but it should make sense eventually. And there we go. So anything that gets changed in the master material instances will be passed on to the material instances, and this can be handy if you have more math inside of the material. So I need to set that up. Let me remove these. So this red material instance only gets its information from the master instance, and that only gets the information, the red channel information, from the master material. So in this case only this. All the calculations from the green channel and all the calculations from the blue channel are fully ignored, so they don't get passed on. Anything from the blue channel gets passed on, but nothing from the green channel, red channel, etc., etc. And that can be quite interesting. Let's change something to the master material again. There we go, we get the red power. What shall we add? Let's add a value for opacity. Or, yeah, let's add a value for opacity. Let's make this translucent. And we get a new scalar. There we go. Red opacity. There. Let's make a new one for blue opacity, for green opacity. Green opacity. And blue opacity. We can actually use these ones again. There you go. Get them true. Green and false. And blue in this one. Alright. Now let's say the red opacity normally is 0.5. The green opacity is 0.2, so almost not visible. And the blue opacity is always 1 in this case. There, it's very visible. Let's go back to the master instances once this is done saving. As you can see, let me reduce the red opacity and actually show grid. You can see that the red one is slightly opacity. It's slightly translucent because it's an opacity of 0.5. The green one has actually a much higher translucency because it says opacity of 0.2. And it's definitely visible when I lower the power of this. And then there's the blue one, which doesn't have any opacity at all, any translucency at all. And there we go. You can definitely see it in here. The blue one has no translucency, the green one is very translucent, the red one is half translucent. Material instances though, now what's interesting is that everything in the master instances get passed on to the material instances. So if I want multiple blue ones, I can actually just duplicate this one. No, not a material instance, sorry. I'm gonna duplicate this one and I'm gonna call it blue transparent, for instance. And I'm gonna do it 0.1. In this case, for this material instance, the blue power of, let's try and explain this better, and get the material instance in there as well. There, oh no, come here. So the blue power from this material instance is passed on to the material instance, which is still the same from the master material. But the red information, the red calculations are not there. The green calculations are not there either. The only thing changed in the material instance is the blue opacity. So that's the only math that changed. Everything else, the blue power is still the same, so it's kept as calculations, which saves a few calculations. The same could be said for the red and the green channel. The only calculations that needs to be redone, if in this case, is the blue opacity. If I actually disable that and only enable the blue power and change that, then the blue opacity calculations are still the same from the master instance. So those get passed on and don't need to be recalculated anymore. Only the blue power in this case needs to be recalculated. Everything else stays the same. And this makes material instances and material instances very interesting to be used. I'm not really sure if there's a better way to explain it, especially from someone who is not a proper native English speaking person. So let me try and iterate that. If you use a static switch parameter, then only the calculations that go through true or false, depending on which is set, will be passed on to the material instance. So in this case, only everything that's set to blue, all these calculations are passed on. The green ones will be ignored. The red ones will be ignored. And then you go to the master instance. So all the calculations that are not red or green are passed on. It doesn't need the calculations from the red or green. And if I disable both of them in this master instance, all the calculations are the same. So there are no new calculations needed. The only thing the engine does is create an instance and that's it. All the calculations are get passed on. Now let's go to the material instance and let's change the blue power to 100. All the calculations are still the same besides the blue power. That is the only calculation that needs to be redone. The calculations for the blue opacity are still the same, so they are passed on from the master instance. The only change is the blue power. So that's the only thing that needs to be recalculated. It doesn't have the information from the red or the green. So in theory, now if I explain this properly, these are three master instances. The blue, the green, and the red. And the only thing they have in common is that they have the same master material. They don't share the same math, and that's it. They don't share the same math. They are actually three different materials altogether, but they all come from the same master material. So to explain it one more time and hopefully better, I made this small, very simple diagram. If a static switch is used for the red, green, and blue channel as I did before, like this, the red math, the green math, and the blue math, then when the static switch is set so that only the red math is passed on, the only math that gets passed on is the red. Green and the blue is ignored. Now for the material instance, if nothing is changed in this after this switch, then no new calculations are needed and are passed on unaltered. So no new calculations, no new math. If the only thing changed is the opacity, then that will be the only calculation that is redone or recalculated. All the other calculations will be passed on. And the same if anything else changed in this instance. If the switches are set up so that only the green math is passed on, then that's literally the thing. Only the green math gets passed on. The blue math and the red math is ignored. If you then create an instance of this master instance and nothing changed, no new calculations are needed and are passed on unaltered. If you, however, for instance, change something in the math, in this case the opacity, then that is the only calculation that will be redone or recalculated. All the other calculations will be passed on. And the same if you change something else in another instance of this master instance that does the green math. And the same obviously goes for if the switches are set up for the blue math. So if the blue math then gets another instance, in this case there's another instance, and if nothing changed, then the green math is totally ignored still, the red math is totally ignored still. The only math that's passed on is the blue math. If nothing changed, no new calculations are needed, so it's still the same as the blue math in the master material. If you change, however, the opacity, then that will be the only thing that changed, and that will be the only thing that being recalculated or redone. All the other calculations will be passed on. And the same if you make another instance of the master instance. And that's basically it. I hope this explains it a little bit better, and let me actually make it full screen. File, save as on desktop. Master instance. No compression. Let's just add that on the screen. I'm not sure if I can explain this better than I did. I'm sure somebody who has actually proper math knowledge skills and is a native English speaker, or at least smarter than me, it should be easy for him to explain this. And if you use this properly, it can save you a lot of calculations over your whole project, because you only need a few master materials, and the only things that need to be changed can be put behind switches, and those can be used properly for master instances so that you keep the amount of calculations that constantly need to be redone at a minimum. And I hope that that explains it properly enough for you to start using material instances, master instances, and instances of those master instances. And yeah, that's a lot of instances. I hope you learned something from this. Take care.